Well, I think we can start as I see most of the audience on the already on the webinar. So, good morning, everyone, and welcome to today InnoMatch growth session on successful commercialization stories. My name is Carlos Gonzalez from TIC Biomed, and I will be moderating today's session. Before we begin, just a few housekeeping notes. All participants are mute. You can post your questions in the Q&A box. And this session is being recorded as it's going to be at your disposal after the webinar. Today we will hear two inspiring commercialization stories from innovative European companies that have moved from research and innovation into real market deployment. First, we will welcome Jordi Rovira from MySphera, who will share how their real-time and location solutions are improving hospital processes across more than 50 hospitals in Europe. And then we will hear from Neil Inglis, CTO of AquaB, who will present their experience commercializing nano-bubble technology in the energy and water treatment sector, including the recent international commercial milestone. After both presentations, we will move into a panel discussions, followed by the open Q&A session with all you as participants. So thank you all for joining us today, and let's get started. Thank you so much, Neil and Jordi, to be here. We are going to start with Jordi. So Jordi, the floor is yours.
Okay. Yeah. So we are representing MySphera. This picture is a hospital in Liverpool, the Allerhay Children's Hospital, and it's a motivational hospital for us because it was driving innovation and transformation in healthcare. Yeah, can we move to the next slide? So yeah, MySphera, it's been there for more than 10 years with the aim of improving hospital processes using IoT technologies. We have a patient tracking solution that helps to follow the patient journeys. And with that, we provide real-time applications for the hospital. Yeah, if we move to the next one. So we identified the problem of bad coordination in big, medium-sized hospitals. That was something that is common still in big organizations. Important processes like the emergency department process, the surgical process, and other demanding processes in the hospital involve many different teams. And if we move to the next slide. Yeah, that involves different teams in the same process and coordination and communication with these teams that are separated in big distances is not really good. And there's still a lot of phone calls or shouting at the corridor to find the patient or the porter or to find important equipment. So we came up with the solution of tracking the important assets or patients along the process and providing these real-time information. We were doing this with a Bluetooth tag and a Bluetooth gateway, and that was providing the real-time journey of patients or equipment, and that was sent to a platform that was serving real-time application for the different people participating in the process. That was pretty much improving coordination of the different stakeholders participating in the process that we wanted to play. If we move to the next slide, please. So in this way, each team in the process, so for example, this is the surgical process, you would have admission, you would have the preparation area, you would have the operating theaters, then the recovery areas, and then hospitalization or discharge. Each of these teams would have a real-time application being fed by this real-time information, and they will coordinate much better with this solution. Currently, it's still done pretty manual, and then for the manual situations, it's working poorly. Yeah, the next one. So for us, after having this solution, we needed to tackle the public market to validate that we were really attracting our customers. Thanks to the InnoMatch project, we were able to deploy this solution and validate this solution in the hospital clinic in Valencia. And also, as a result of that, that was really helping us to attract other important hospitals, one in Paris, the Clinic Saint Joseph, and we are now working with another hospital in Catalonia, in Parc Taulí. So that was really useful just to start the traction. And as well as that, we identified an important public procurement in our sector also for optimizing health and care resources. That was because an instrument from the EAC, the Spin for EAC, basically make us aware of this public tender. So we applied and we were able to win these bids, and then develop a new solution on this scheme. But I think I'll probably tell a little bit more later on. So I guess yeah, we can leave it there. If you want covers, and I will say more later on in the discussion section. Yeah, well, thank you.
Thank you so much, Jordi. I would like to remind our audience to feel free to add their questions on the Q&A box. I know that not all of you are related to healthcare solutions, but I saw some that they are related to healthcare. So do not hesitate. Don't be shy to post your questions to Jordi for the after session, or even not just related to healthcare, but how they leverage the Spin for EAC services, on how they dealt with this Dynamo PCP. Okay, then thank you, Jordi. I would like to give the floor now to Neil. Would you like to share your screen, Neil?
Yes, I'll just do that now. Let's see.
Okay, we see your screen.
Right. Good. Hopefully I can go into full screen mode.
Perfect.
So hello, I'm Niall English. I'm the founder and CTO at AquaB, and I want to talk a bit about AquaB's journey in the past, I suppose, 6-7 years, and how we have developed to the point that we're now doing commercial deployment with Saudi Aramco in the energy sector. We're making progress in water treatment as well. And I want to talk about the role of European and EIC services in that. So AquaB was set up in 2020 based upon my invention 9 years ago of a way of generating tiny bubbles using static electric fields instead of membranes, so that there's no membrane blockage. And we set up an EIC project 3.5 years ago in late 2022. That finished a year and a half ago, the 2-year project. It was very successful. We accomplished all of our goals and then some. And since about a year and a half ago, we've been making great use of the EIC's BAS, and I'll talk a bit about that later in more detail. We signed our first commercial contract last autumn with Saudi Aramco. We've been working with them for 5.5 years, and we got great support from the Spin for EIC legal negotiation services for that, and I'll speak a bit about that later through Corvers, which is very beneficial for us. In terms of the senior leadership group within the company. We have the 6 individuals here. I'm the founder and CTO, and we've got a good mix between men and women in terms of executive positions, technology, engineering, business, accountancy, marketing, overall business leadership. Briefly about nanobubbles themselves. Well, what are they? Well, imagine if you have, say, a glass of carbonated water that you'd buy in the supermarket. Those bubbles, about 1 or 2 millimeters in size, rise in 10 seconds. Then, if we have a smaller bubble, for example, the bubble that you would have at the bottom of a glass of beer or champagne, just about visible to the naked eye, about 1/20th of a millimeter. Technically, that's called a mesoscale bubble. That rises more slowly, maybe every 20 minutes. So the smaller the bubble, the more slowly it rises. Now, with my invention, we can make tiny bubbles that are so small. For example, these nanobubbles here on the right-hand side, compared to the larger bubbles that we see on the left-hand side. And you see that on both the left-hand side pictures, we have a similar volume of gas, similar volume of bubbles. It's just that the surface area is so much larger in the case of nanobubbles. And those nanobubbles don't rise. So they stay in the water, meaning that we can put lots of extra gas in water way above the solubility limit. Why is this important? Well, for example, in aeration of water, wastewater treatment, or for example, in fish farms. We all know that in summertime, there's lots of fish kills. Why? Because the level of dissolved oxygen goes down as temperature goes up. But we can get around that by putting extra tiny bubbles that don't rise in the water. And we can do it in a low energy way, for example, using solar panels without needing membranes. So this really is a very important sort of disruptive physics invention. Right now, in terms of some of the features of our technology, this electric field approach means that there's no membranes and therefore no blockages. The power consumption is very low. We can use it for any type of liquid, not just water. So we can enhance the calorific efficiency in diesel and petrol engines. Any gas type we like, whether it's air, nitrogen, oxygen, hydrogen, carbon dioxide. We can retrofit it, for example, to existing processes, link it up to solar panels or wind farms. And the IP position is very robust in terms of patenting. And there's also no moving parts. So there's good reliability, reduced downtime. I mean, it is a platform-wide technology. It can be used for any type of water, gas, liquid gas operation. I'm going to talk more about the oil and gas sector today, where our bridgehead market is, although we're doing lots of work in the water treatment sector as well. So in oil and gas, of course, it can be used for water treatment within oil and gas, for example, oil-water separation, ballast water treatment, produced water treatment from the wells, growing algae, and then, of course, fracking itself in terms of EOR, enhanced oil recovery. So by us adding nanobubbles into the frack water to be then injected into the oil well, the surface tension goes down, so the frack water can then penetrate the pore sediment matrix more easily to get oil out. So, for example, last December, we were doing commissioning in Saudi Aramco on our commercial contract. So here's 5 of our nanobubble generators, the Vulcan 500 series, linked up together. You can see on the left, there's 5 of them there, and they're all joined up with a manifold there. And we were able to get the supersaturation around 15% above Henry's law saturation, and this in only a few hours. And this was able to survive the trauma of 300 bar wellhead pump injection. So we effectively did the whole frack job. The only thing that was missing was an oil well last December. And now we're heading off to Saudi Arabia in the next month or so to do oil well trials for several weeks. Now with a real oil well and fracking for real. In terms of some of our achievements, we've optimized the product design. We've TRL 9 now with CE marking, HX ratings, outdoor IP ratings. Got a good commercial team in place. We're protecting our brand. For example, with Access Plus, we're doing trademark submissions. and also, working on more product patent submissions beyond the sort of background technology. I think marketing is very important, the right kind of marketing. So we've done thought leadership articles, scientific articles, arranging to go to webinars, gone to trade fairs, for example, with the EIC trade fair team, the ITF program. We're very active on the marketing front. To talk specifically about Spin-Free IC, we got great advice from them in terms of legal negotiation last year when we were working on our first commercial contract with Ramco after 5 years of working up to that point on R&D contracts. So they were able to help us navigate the detailed contract landscape, the IP clauses, the foreground, the background. They gave us very good advice through our discussions, and they really made us ready for the whole actual contractual reality of delivering the contract with the appropriate IP treatment, so that we own our own foreground IP as distinct from the project IP itself, which is very, very important. Also, we benefited through this maneuvering from the ITF, the International Trade Fair Program, another great initiative from the EIC, for example, through GITEC's global and North Africa attendance into the Middle East and North African Maghreb market. So that's been very useful. We've also used the EU IP Help Desk to get advice on our patenting strategy, which was important for the Aramco contract and in general. And through Access Plus, we've also been, getting great assistance in terms of trademarking and product patents now to expand our product patent portfolio from the sort of background patents of the electric field approach in general. I imagine I've probably used up my full 10-minute allowance. So I will be happy to take any questions in the general Q&A session. And thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Neil. It was very interesting. You mentioned some aspect that I would like to highlight now during our panel discussion, as I think it's very important and very relevant for our audience, as some of them are key, as it could be the CE marking or the access to other potential markets, leveraging this EIC Trade Fair program. So as Jordi was the first one to start with their presentation, I would like to ask you first within this panel discussion, how important was for AquaB to find public sector customers?
For MySphera, it was the main validation. The main customer for us is a public customer. You also get private hospitals, but they work in a completely different mindset. So everything started by prototyping a solution and attending the needs from a big hospital in Valencia when we were very early in our process as a company. That was the hospital of La Fe. And they were the very first big public hospital seeking for our kind of concept. And from that point, we gain confidence, and we gain a technological matureness to carry on growing from there. So it was the first time that we validated that there was a need in the public sector. And then from there, we started to grow and learning more with other experiences. But definitely, it is really our main source of revenue right now, the public sector. And for us, it's critical just to understand which are their needs and how we should adapt our solutions to them. So definitely very, very relevant.
It's very interesting that you mentioned that it is like the biggest revenue stream. So Neil, how important it was for AquaB to find public sector customer. It is similar to MySphera experience. What would you say?
Yeah, I mean, I would say very similar things to Jordi. Because, for example, water treatment and oil extraction are typically government-owned activities in not in every country, but in most countries. The initial kind of customers will often be public sector, could occasionally be private sector as well. So we certainly haven't neglected the private sector market either. But we found that typically public sector companies, government-owned companies, for example, Saudi Aramco or national water companies, often tend to be more broad-minded and have deliberate procurement tracks. I think that because profit per se isn't typically an explicit motive, or maybe some motive, but it's not the number one motive in public sector organizations, they're more open to trying out new technologies, particularly if they have a large kind of innovation budget, because they're always looking for efficiencies. So I think that public service, large public service bodies often are the most receptive to new technologies because profit isn't the motive or isn't the first motive. Many do have a profit-making remit, but it's not always the top priority, which is refreshing, because the more profit is important, the shorter term the mentality is, and the less open customers are to processes that could save them lots of money and hassle over time, and really improve ultimately their profit margins, which is the ironic thing, really.
It is interesting what you already mentioned about the openness of the customer. So I'm interested to know how was the start, and what was the biggest misconception you had?
Well, in the case of AquaB, I can talk briefly. I mean, I'll just mention the Aramco one, for example. So our relationship with Aramco started from an IquaB awards ceremony. So during COVID, AquaB was set up during COVID. We were participating in the finals of the Institute of Chemical Engineers Global Awards in the water category. My other spin out was also in a different category as well, also funded by the EIC Accelerator, although not at that point in time. Anyway, AquaB won that, and Aramco came second. But the Aramco team saw our presentation, we saw theirs as finalists, and the 4 or 5 finalists, and they liked our technology. So a couple of months later, they just wrote to us on foot of the IquaB virtual presentation during COVID, asking for further details and hoping that we could potentially set up some kind of an R&D project. So we helped them to define an application for them to get internal funding, and our application with them came the first out of 65 projects internally for prioritized funding, and that set everything up in terms of an initial R&D project that lasted for 3 years, that then was able to lead on to the commercial one.
And for you, Jordi, how was the start, and what were the differences between your initial thoughts and what then was this commercialization relationship?
Yeah, I guess we have 2 very important milestones. The very first start, it was when we basically live a spin-off from the Polytechnic University of Valencia, and with the first very prototype, we were able to deploy that, as I mentioned before, in one of the largest public hospitals in Spain, Hospital La Fe. It was the very first big project that the company was facing with an early technology, and that basically gave us very first customers. That was very useful. That was 10 years ago, more or less. Then a few years later, we had another big important moment for the company, which was when, okay, we have this real-time location technology, which is good, but it feels like this technology should be used for impacting in the real processes of the hospital, not just to provide the location of the patient, but just to really transform and automate processes. So there was a decisive bid in a hospital in Barcelona, the Vall d'Hebron Hospital there. And they were tendering a solution that was able to orchestrate processes in the surgical block using real-time location solutions. And then for us, that was the first step through process automation using our technology. That was a big change because then we were able to develop the very first concept and apply for the EAC, and then make the EAC and come with a final product that we could start to commercialize. And from then on, MySphera was not just a company that was providing a location solution, but a company that was able to transform hospital processes, and that gave us a much bigger scope. And EAC was really important for us to make that change and increase our business scope. So, yeah, I think was the most important.
In this regard, Jordi, you mentioned you transition to have a spin-off to be able to transform the whole hospital processes. How did you do to adapt your value proposition, being a spin-off, to meet the hospital needs and constraints, which I guess there are not a little.
Yeah, absolutely. As I said, we've been doing that through all our journey, right? I guess as Neil, we started identifying that information and registration and automation and providing where the patient was important for our customers 10 years ago, but that was not enough. We were identifying that hospitals needed more than that, and what they really lacked was how to manage these processes that involve many different teams. And that was how MySphera was able to change its value proposition from being a mere location provider, real-time location provider, to a solution that was able to automate healthcare processes. And later on, we are still doing this, addition process, because of course now we are fully impacted by the AI era. And now what they are asking is, please just give me some insights from these processes. And so we are now pushing our product into the AI, so we can report different services in the hospital, which are the deviation from normality, which are the most damaged services in the hospital. So right now, our value proposition is moving to the data exploitation. So we started in the physical world providing hardware. Now we are more in the AI kind of business.
Oh, it is interesting to see this learning curve. And as you mentioned, we are now into the AI era, so you cannot refuse it. You have to adapt to it. For AquaB, Neil, it was a similar path to discover the public sector needs and to adapt your value proposition to it. Or how was your journey on this regard?
Yeah, I mean there are certainly parallels with MySphera. So I think that the biggest one is going to transition to data and data analysis, which often involves AI. So we set up. I mean, one of the big needs for any customer, whether public or private, is that they often want a data feed in real time as to how the generator is performing in terms of level of gas being added, dissolved gas levels, electrical conductivity, pH, surface tension, all of these, whatever variables are relevant for their particular process that they're trying to optimize. So by having real-time measurements and setting up connectivity to a data processing cloud, we can have real-time monitoring and control systems developed, which our latest versions include neural network modeling. We've been able to publish on that in the scientific literature and have prepared white papers as well for people who are interested, which is a lot of customers. So I think this is especially important in the public sector monitoring, where in the public sector, because profit isn't typically the immediate motive. I mean, it is one motive in many public sector or semi-state companies, but not the most immediate one. They can be more they can often be more demanding in terms of wanting real-time data updates to prove value for money, because value for money for the taxpayer is part of their remit. Also, in terms of, say, coming up with approaches for tracking carbon capture, for example, and carbon tax and carbon credit economics, being able to track quantities of carbon captured, for example, is also another good example where you have to have the right kind of data capture for monitoring for the whole economics, because the raison d'etre of the process is indeed to capture carbon, and that has to be measured in real time and ideally optimized. So these are some of the kind of learnings that we have had in our journey with, particularly with public sector customers, where such data capture motivations are really to the fore in terms of taxpayer accountancy.
To have those learnings, you need to face some obstacles. So I would like to know what were the main challenges you faced. I mean, in terms of validation, regulatory compliance, procurement procedures, and besides, what were these main challenges? How did you overcome them?
Well, in the case of AquaB, in many cases, procurement will only and can only work with CE marking or UL certification or whatever the national or continental equivalent is. In other cases, they can be more relaxed. It depends on the situation. That's one hard constraint that is often but not always there. A second one is procurement itself. They will want to see your latest perhaps 2 or 3 balance sheets, accountancy balance sheets, to make sure that the company is on an even keel financially. So having all of that up to date is important. I mean, in some cases, they might even want it audited, which creates a further barrier. So, and then of course, having the right IP and differentiating project IP and foreground IP versus the background patents you have, and ensuring, say, commercial freedom to operate with others in the sector, that there's no sort of sneaky attempts at exclusivity. So having the right contract law is a barrier that you have to be aware of. I could go on, but those are 3 of the obvious ones that I found.
Oh, it is very interesting. I would like to know if for Jordi there is something similar as, for example, I think for hospitals you also need to be so aligned with the regulations. So please go on.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, we face challenges to every single different dimension, as as Neil very similar. So, for example, our solution, we've been always with the intention of being in the line of being an operational solution, not a clinical solution. So we need to be very careful on that, because otherwise medical device regulation would apply to our solution, and which would put a lot of constraints when implementing our service in the hospital. Uh, not just that, but of course, if you want to install a solution in a surgical block, you need to pass all the electromagnetic regulation certifications, and your devices need to be designed in a certain way to not get dirt, and so that are more regulations. It has to be IP67 for the waterproof in those kind of environments. So from a technical point of view, there is like an important work you have to do. But most importantly, when you are there already, you have a product, then you have to face the sell. You need to sell these to the public sector. And then the sale times are very long. You can spend more than 1 year just from the very beginning when you start conversations until you get the tender. That can really kill a startup. It's really difficult to keep going these long sales cycles. And of course, the sale, it's really complex because you don't have just one stakeholder. You have the buyer, which typically is the medical director or the CEO of the hospital, but then you have other stakeholders that are key to enable that sale. You might have the information technology director, and of course the responsible for the service you want to optimize, for example, the surgical coordinator or the emergency department responsible. So all of them are key stakeholders that can really stop your opportunity. You need to align with all of them in order to get some chance to get a project. And of course, then it's a public tender and you are competing with other companies too. So I have to say that it's really tough.
No, but I think this was very interesting, all what you mentioned, that you have very long sales cycles, that the ecosystem is complex to navigate, as it is a public sector, that there are many stakeholders that you need to involve. So I think that was very, very valuable. But if you had to name just one key factor that really made the difference in your journey, what would it be for our audience?
Okay, I would basically choose our solution right now is to transform the way of working in hospitals, right? It really represents an important change of culture, because suddenly people is given with these real-time applications, they have to start to work in a different way. When you are putting in place that kind of technology and healthcare professionals in their daily practice, it's a big change. So probably the most critical part is engage them into this new way of working. That is critical for the success of the project. And we do it in a way that we engage them from the very beginning in a kind of co-creation of their new service, so they feel like they are part of the whole thing, and that basically put into the same game from medical doctors, nurses, but also the cleaning team, but also the porters and all the different teams that are part of the same business. And they are very important for the patient flow. So I think that is really relevant, actually.
No, I think it is very relevant to engage your users, not just within a workflow integration, but through a co-creation to make them relevant to give them a voice, right?
Yeah. Especially because groups like porters or the cleaning team, they are not typically given the voice in these kind of things, but they are very important for the flow because they can disrupt the service. But if they feel important because they are an important piece of the whole process, suddenly they have visibility and they then it works. That's all.
And in your opinion, Neil, what would be this one key factor that really made the difference for you?
I think if I had to choose one, I've already mentioned other points, so I'll choose a different point deliberately based upon other things I've said. In my mind, for hardware deep tech, it's manufacturing capability. So designing from the very first prototype designing with mass manufacture in mind, and not trying to necessarily use bespoke parts, except perhaps for the very IP sensitive parts, in which case it's a good idea. But being able to use off the shelf components and really building into the initial design, how can you manufacture this at large scale so that if an order comes in suddenly, that you're able to have the production capacity to match that. So in other words, what I'm talking about is massive supply side capability and capacity delivered through simplicity. The more simple something is, the more clever it is usually, in my experience. And then, of course, having the product patents and trademarking and IP protection to back that up.
Well, I think it is very inspiring, despite being in a starting stage, to encourage companies to think big.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And having ownership of that internally, at least for now, you can outsource later when you're huge, manufacturing locally, but that could be 10 years, 15 years down the line before you need to get to that point. Perhaps sooner, it depends on the situation. But for now, trying to keep control and having that expansion capacity.
Mhm. Then I would like to change to other topic, as you already mentioned some EAC services as the Trade Fair program, Spin for EAC, the EAC Access Plus. So I would like to know, how did these EAC services or the EU funded support contribute to your commercialization journey? If you can mention some of this already mentioned and explain a little bit why do you consider key in your journey?
Yeah, I mean, I'll talk briefly about AquaB. Yeah, certainly the EU IP help desk, not strictly an EIC service, was very important in terms of looking at IP positions, IP licensing, ownership of upcoming product patents that we were considering and that we moved on. That was very important to have a robust freedom to operate and licensing clarity in terms of the company's product IP. Also, in terms of that was important in terms of negotiations with large scale players like Aramco, to avoid any kind of sneaky exclusivity attempts over the technology. If people want exclusivity over the technology, they need to buy the company, effectively, more or less, or else you could spin out a subsidiary of the company and then internally license the relevant IP for that sector and then sell that company, for example, if you want to carry on with the mother company, which you may well want to do. So there's that. So the IP structure is fundamental. Moving on to EIC services, then of course Spin for EIC has been very helpful, not only with the Corvers helping with the contract negotiation with Aramco, which certainly saved lots of money. I mean, Irish corporate lawyers certainly know what to charge, so that could easily have cost 20,000 euros plus in Ireland. So that was very helpful. But also they've helped with setting up tenders. We're trying to apply for tenders through the TED tenders, European daily, and indeed international tenders. So helping to build longer term business, which is very, very good and helpful of them. And then, of course, the trade fair program. I've been to 2 trade fairs, UTEX Global, and twice to Marrakesh. That's an excellent service. That's really been able to move us close to potential customers and partners. So I would say that even the EIC have helped me go to other trade fairs where there wasn't an explicit EIC presence, but they helped me set me up and get AquaB going there. For example, to ADIPEC, which is the world's largest oil and gas trade fair in Abu Dhabi every November. So we're certainly going back there for a second time this year. So I think that all of these business acceleration services and IP services and Access Plus as well for trademarking and helping with product patents and business acceleration, laboratory accreditation work as well for independent laboratory testing. All of these, EIC or EIC adjacent services or EU services are really helpful. I mean, you could save over a few years. This could save a company potentially hundreds of thousands of euros in legal fees through full funding or half funding arrangements, subsidized business acceleration and business introductions with the trade fairs. I mean, the value for companies is phenomenal, worth hundreds of thousands of euros. Probably AquaB is presumably, I think, benefited from services, getting up into at least 100,000 or 200,000 euros in the past, year and a half. It really is excellent. Of course, you have to have the initiative to go out and get it, like anything in life. But c'est la vie. Go out and get it. It's available.
And for you, Jordi, which were these EAC services or EU-funded support that really help MySphera to be where you are today?
I think very similar as Neil. For us, it was internationalization. I mean, we had a lot of support, coaching services for exporting our solution out of Spain in Europe. We had a lot of support in the UK. As a result of that, we got this project in France, then also in Belgium. Now we are in Bulgaria. So that couldn't be possible without this support. And of course, that was also in line with all the venues provided by the EAC, which have really encouraged all these connections with other markets. So we couldn't really understand MySphera without all these services that we had along this time. And speaking for EAC, it was equally very useful for us. It helped us to identify a very relevant tender, and they basically supported all the tendering process preparation, all the legal parts, which was really useful for us because it was, the very first time we were applying on this kind of schemes. And as a result, we got the bid, and it was again MySphera increasing its IPR and the whole value of the company. So all in all, I would say that MySphera it's been really enriched by the EAC services. And as a result, now we are not just a Spanish company, but we are becoming like an international company.
I think it was very interesting, Jordi, and I would like to highlight 2 quotes that it is not able to understand MySphera without these services, and that you are not anymore a Spanish company, but an international company. I think this is very valuable, and it is very, very keen to highlight. I have one last topic, and this is not for our panel discussion. It is for directly for the audience. So I would like you in a minute or two to provide some advices to other innovators as there are in the audience targeting public buyers. What would be an advice for your peers based on your own experience targeting public buyers?
Yeah, if for us, it's in our sector. If you are in healthcare and you are trying to enter technology within the healthcare sector, just of course have a very clear idea of all the regulations you need to comply with, because it's a tough sector for that. um, you have to consider that you will have to interact with different stakeholders, as well as the buyer. So you must be prepared on that, because you'll have to convince two other prescriptors to get your sale. And yeah, you need to have a very competitive solution, because it's an area where there are a lot of competitors. So you need to go a little bit beyond state of the art, just to put your solution in a domain that has been already taken by big companies. Also, partnerships are very relevant for us. For example, in Spain, we are in partnership with Telefonica, one of the big telcos. Being a small company, it's difficult to reach all the different parts of the country, and understanding which are the public tenders. But if you get good partnerships, you can expand your reachability. You can really be aware when an opportunity arises, and then work together to have a bigger reach. So I think that is really relevant for us, just to be aware of what is happening in the other corner of the country.
And for you, Neil, what would be this advices to your peers working or targeting public buyers?
Yeah, I mean, I think the big advice I have is get the IP right, background, foreground, get the legalities of that. Have your product certified, for example, whatever relevant legislation, CE marking, etc. This can take a very long time, many months or a year. So you need to really get to work very, very early on the product development. Don't necessarily wait for market interests. And another one is that I haven't spoken about so far is the value of human relationships. So being able to go that extra mile and do something that's not written down in the contract out of goodwill, I think is very important in terms of showing bona fides and momentum, and that you're prepared to do something a little bit outside of the procurement framework to move something along. Really, that kind of human touch is important, because business is ultimately about people and relationships, and that can be especially important in the public sector, where things can move a bit more slowly and things are more complicated, because often profit isn't the only motive. It's objective number 4 or 5 in that order. The remit is to make some profit, but it's not the be all and end all. Yeah.
Well, I saw that there were a question from Rona in the chat, but you already answered it, Neil, by written. I don't know, Rona, if you would like to ask something. I can open your microphone.
Sorry, it's actually Emer. I didn't realize it was signing me in as Rona, but thank you both first for the insights this morning. It's been really good. And no, I think largely the question has been answered. Just trying to understand how best to develop these multi-year relationships. I guess one follow-on question, actually, have you experienced employee turnover within these large organizations, where maybe your champion or part of the core team has moved on? And if so, how have either of you dealt with that experience?
Yeah, I mean, I'm experiencing that now. Actually, I mean, my lead man at Aramco is retiring shortly.
Right.
And it's other people, because we've been dealing with Aramco now for almost 6 years, or 5.5, 6 years at this stage. Those relationships with other people have been built naturally, organically over those number of years. It would be much more challenging if one has developed a relationship with a company and then the key person moves on only after 6 months or so, and there hasn't been that organic development of secondary people in terms of internal champions. If that was to happen, though, I think that the best thing you can do from day one is to look to speak not just to your internal champion, as it were, de facto or even officially declared, but just try to also talk to his colleagues. And one great way of doing that is to jump on a plane and go there. Because if you're doing something over a video conference or email, you don't always get access.
Yeah.
To the second or third in command, because the guy who's second or third or fourth in command, you always need to treat them very well, because in a few years' time they may be number one if this other person has moved on or gets a transfer to a different division, or in my case simply gets older and retires. So because years pass, and this is what happens after 5 or 6 years. People often retire because the people who have the authority to initiate these contacts are naturally older, and therefore after multiple years they start to retire, as c'est la vie. So physically go there, build up the goodwill, invite them to dinner, try to do something outside of work to build up the social rapport. Business is all about people and goodwill, and goodwill in many cases is remembered. Maybe not immediately, but don't treat business as a transactional game, tit for tat. That's not how it works, in my experience.
It is very interesting. We have not a question, but a comment. Kudos to the presenters. Inspiring to see Europe innovate. So, what to say? Thank you so much, Stanislav, and all the people in the audience. I hope it has been a useful session for you. And also, I would like to say huge thank you to you both, Jordi and Neil, to have time for us to provide some of your experience to others that are in the same position as you were in the past. So thank you so much. We are quite on time, so I think it's been a very nice session. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Okay. See you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.